Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to some new members of our Patreon family. Zip, Marie, KMC, Charlie, Jay, and Catherine. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. By becoming members of Patreon, you help us remain 100% listener supported and ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting Boring Books for Bedtime and finding out more about the perks available to subscribers, including exclusive episodes and a brand new monthly series of fictional fancies, which this year is a reading of the classic Three Men in a Boat, you'll find a link to Patreon in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support us with a one-time tip. No subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight, we're relaxing with the classic Robert's Rules of Order for Deliberative Assemblies. In two parts. Part 1, Rules of Order, a compendium of parliamentary law based upon the rules and practice of Congress. Part 2, Organization and Conduct of Business, a simple explanation of the methods of organizing and conducting the business of societies, conventions, and other deliberative assemblies, by Major Henry M. Robert, Corps of Engineers, USA. First published in 1876 by S.C. Griggs and Company, Chicago. Let's begin. Preface. There appears to be much needed a work on parliamentary law, based in its general principles upon the rules and practice of Congress, and adapted in its details to the use of ordinary societies. Such a work should give not only the methods of organizing and conducting the meetings, the duties of the officers, and the names of the ordinary motions, but in addition, should state in a systematic manner, in reference to each motion, its object and effect, whether it can be amended or debated, if debatable, the extent to which it opens the main question to debate, the circumstances under which it can be made, and what other motions can be made while it is pending. This manual has been prepared with a view to supplying the above information in a condensed and systematic manner, each rule being either complete in itself or giving references to every section that in any way qualifies it, so that a stranger to the work can refer to any special subject with safety. To aid in quickly referring to as many as possible of the rules relating to each motion, there is placed immediately before the index a table of rules, which enables one, without turning a page, to find the answers to some 200 questions. The table of rules is so arranged as to greatly assist the reader in systematizing his knowledge of parliamentary law. The second part is a simple explanation of the common methods of conducting business in ordinary meetings, in which the motions are classified according to their uses, and those used for a similar purpose compared together. This part is expressly intended for that large class of the community who are unfamiliar with parliamentary usages and are unwilling to devote much study to the subject, but would be glad with little labor to learn enough to enable them to take part in meetings of deliberative assemblies without fear of being out of order. The object of rules of order in deliberative assemblies is to assist an assembly to accomplish the work for which it was designed in the best possible manner. To do this, it is necessary to somewhat restrain the individual, as the right of an individual in any community to do what he pleases is incompatible with the best interests of the whole. Where there is no law, but every man does what is right in his own eyes, there is the least of real liberty. Experience has shown the importance of definiteness in the law, and in this country, where customs are so slightly established, and the published manuals of parliamentary practice so conflicting, no society should attempt to conduct business without having adopted some work upon the subject, as the authority in all cases not covered by their own rules. It has been well said by one of the greatest of English writers on parliamentary law, whether these forms be in all cases the most national or not, is really not of so great importance. It is much more material that there should be a rule to go by than what that rule is, that there may be a uniformity of proceeding in business, not subject to the caprice of the chairman or captiousness of the members. It is very material that order, decency, and regularity be preserved in a dignified public body. Henry M. Robert, December 1875. Robert's Rules of Order. Introduction. Parliamentary Law. Parliamentary law refers originally to the customs and rules of conducting business in the English Parliament, and thence to the customs and rules of our own legislative assemblies. In England, these customs and usages of Parliament form a part of the unwritten law of the land, and in our own legislative bodies, they are of authority in all cases where they do not conflict with existing rules or precedents. But as a people, we have not the respect which the English have for customs and precedents, and are always ready for innovations which we think are improvements, and hence changes have been and are being constantly made in the written rules which our legislative bodies have found best to adopt. As each house adopts its own rules, it results that the two houses of the same legislature do not always agree in their practice. Even in Congress, the order of precedence of motions is not the same in both houses, and the previous question is admitted in the House of Representatives, but not in the Senate. As a consequence of this, the exact method of conducting business in any particular legislative body is to be obtained only from the legislative manual of that body. The vast number of societies, political, literary, scientific, benevolent, and religious, formed all over the land, though not legislative, are still deliberative in their character, and must have some system of conducting business, and some rules to govern their proceedings, and are necessarily subject to the common parliamentary law, where it does not conflict with their own special rules. But as their knowledge of parliamentary law has been obtained from the usages in this country, rather than from the customs of Parliament, it has resulted that these societies have followed the customs of our own legislative bodies, and our people have thus been educated under a system of parliamentary law which is peculiar to this country, and yet so well established as to supersede the English parliamentary law as the common law of ordinary deliberative assemblies. The practice of the National House of Representatives should have the same force in this country as the usages of the House of Commons have in England, in determining the general principles of the common parliamentary law of the land. But it does not follow that in every matter of detail the rules of Congress can be appealed to as the common law governing every deliberative assembly. In these matters of detail, the rules of each House of Congress are adapted to their own peculiar wants, and are of no force whatever in other assemblies. But upon all great parliamentary questions, such as what motions can be made, what is their order of precedence, which can be debated, what is their effect, etc., the common law of the land is settled by the practice of the U.S. House of Representatives, and not by that of the English Parliament, the U.S. Senate, or any other body. While in extreme cases there is no difficulty in deciding the question as to whether the practice of Congress determines the common parliamentary law, yet between these extremes there must necessarily be a large number of doubtful cases upon which there would be a great difference of opinion, and to avoid the serious difficulties always arising from a lack of definiteness in the law, every deliberative assembly should imitate our legislative bodies in adopting rules of order for the conduct of their business. Where the practice of Congress differs from that of Parliament upon a material point, the common law of this country follows the practice of Congress. Thus, in every American deliberative assembly having no rules for conducting business, the motion to adjourn would be decided to be undebatable, as in Congress, the English parliamentary law to the contrary notwithstanding. So, if the previous question were negatived, the debate upon the subject would continue as in Congress, whereas in Parliament the subject would be immediately dismissed. So, too, the previous question could be moved when there was before the assembly a motion either to amend, to commit, or to postpone definitely or indefinitely, just as in Congress. Notwithstanding that, according to English parliamentary law, the previous question could not be moved under such circumstances. When the rules of the two houses of Congress conflict, the House of Representative rules, the H.R. rules, are of greater authority than those of the Senate in determining the parliamentary law of the country, just as the practice of the House of Commons, and not the House of Lords, determines the parliamentary law of England. For instance, though the Senate rules do not allow the motion for the previous question, and make the motion to postpone indefinitely take precedence of every other subsidiary motion except to lie on the table, yet the parliamentary law of the land follows the practice of the House of Representatives in recognizing the previous question as a legitimate motion, and assigning to the very lowest rank the motion to postpone indefinitely. But in matters of detail, The rules of the House of Representatives are adapted to the peculiar wants of that body, and are of no authority in any other assembly. No one, for instance, would accept the following HR rules as common parliamentary law in this country: that the chairman, in case of disorderly conduct, would have the power to order the galleries to be cleared, that the ballot could not be used in electing the officers of an assembly, that any 15 members would be authorized to compel the attendance of absent members and make them pay the expenses of the messengers sent after them, that all committees not appointed by the chair would have to be appointed by ballot, and if the required number were not elected by a majority vote, then a second ballot must be taken, in which a plurality of votes would prevail, that each member would be limited in debate upon any question to 1 hour, that a day's notice must be given of the introduction of a bill, and that before its passage it must be read 3 times, and that without the special order of the assembly it cannot be read twice the same day. These examples are sufficient to show the absurdity of the idea that the rules of Congress in all things determine the common parliamentary law. Plan of the work. This manual is prepared to partially meet this want in deliberative assemblies that are not legislative in their character. It has been made sufficiently complete to answer for the rules of an assembly until they see fit to adopt special rules, conflicting with and superseding any of its rules of detail, such as the order of business, Section 44, etc. Even in matters of detail, the practice of Congress is followed, wherever it is not manifestly unsuited to ordinary assemblies, and in such cases, in Part 1, there will be found in a footnote the congressional practice. In the important matters referred to above, in which the practice of the House of Representatives settles the common parliamentary law of the country, this manual strictly conforms to such practice. On account of the party lines being so strictly drawn in Congress, no such thing as harmony of action is possible, and it has been found best to give a bare majority in the House of Representatives, but not in the Senate, the power to take final action upon a question without allowing of any discussion. In ordinary societies, more regard should be paid to the rights of the minority, and a 2/3 vote be required, as in this manual, Section 39, for sustaining an objection to the introduction of a question, or for adopting a motion for the previous question, or for adopting an order closing or limiting debate. In this respect, the policy of the pocket manual is a mean between those of the House and Senate. But some societies will doubtless find it advantageous to follow the practice of the House of Representatives, and others will prefer that of the Senate. It requires a majority, according to the pocket manual, to order the yeas and nays, which is doubtless best in the majority of assemblies. But in all bodies in which the members are responsible to their constituents, a much smaller number should have this power. In Congress it requires but a 1/5 vote, and in some bodies a single member can require a vote to be taken by yeas and nays. Any society adopting this manual should make its rules govern them in all cases to which they are applicable, and in which they are not inconsistent with the bylaws and rules of order of the society. Their own rules should include all the cases where it is desirable to vary from the rules in the manual, and especially should provide for a quorum, Section 43, and an order of business, Section 44, as suggested in these rules. The manual is divided into two distinct parts, each complete in itself. The table at the end contains a large amount of information in a tabular form for easy reference in the midst of the business of a meeting. Part 1 contains a set of rules of order systematically arranged, as shown in the table of contents. Each one of the 45 sections is complete in itself, so that no one unfamiliar with the work can be misled in examining any particular subject. Cross-references are freely used to save repeating from other sections, and by this means the reader, without using the index, is referred to everything in the rules of order that has any bearing upon the subject he is investigating. The references are by sections, and for convenience, the numbers of the sections are placed at the top of each page. The motions are arranged under the usual classes in their order of rank, but in the index under the word motion will be found an alphabetical list of all the motions generally used. In reference to each motion, there is stated 1. Of what motions it takes precedence, that is, what motions may be pending, and yet it be in order to make this motion. 2. To what motions it yields, that is, what motions may be made while the motion is pending. 3. Whether it is debatable or not. 4. Whether it can be amended or not. 5. In case the motion can have no subsidiary motion applied to it, the fact is stated. See adjourn, Section 11 for an example. The meaning is that the particular motion to adjourn, for example, cannot be laid on the table, postponed, committed, or amended. 6. The effect of the motion if adopted. 7. The form of stating the question when peculiar, and whatever other information is necessary to enable one to understand the question. Part 2. While the second part covers the entire ground of the first part, it does so in a much simpler manner, being intended for those who have no acquaintance with the usages of deliberative assemblies. It also explains the method of organizing an assembly or society and conducting a meeting. The motions are treated on an entirely different plan, being classified according to the objects for which they are used, and those of each class compared together, so that the reader may obtain the best motion for the accomplishment of any given object. It omits the complications of parliamentary law, and has but few references to the rules of Congress, or those in this manual. In order to make it complete in itself, it was necessary to repeat a few pages from the first part. Definitions. In addition to the terms defined above, taking precedence of, yielding to, and applying to, see page 14, there are other terms that are liable to be misunderstood, to which attention should be called. Meeting and session. In this manual, the term meeting is used to denote an assembling together of the members of a deliberative assembly for any length of time, during which there is no separation of the members by adjournment. An adjournment to meet again at some other time, even the same day, terminates the meeting, but not the session. which latter includes all the adjourned meetings. The next meeting in this case would be an adjourned meeting of the same session. A meeting of an assembly is terminated by a temporary adjournment. A session of an assembly ends with an adjournment without day and may consist of many meetings. See Session, Section 42. Previous question. This term is frequently understood to refer to the question previously under consideration. As used in this country, it is equivalent to a motion to stop debate and proceed to voting on all the questions before the assembly, with certain exceptions, where it affects only one motion, as to postpone, to reconsider, and an appeal. See Section 20 for a full explanation. Shall the question be considered or discussed? This question, which is put as soon as a subject is brought before an assembly, if any member objects to its consideration, or discussion, or introduction, is not intended to merely cut off debate, but to prevent the question from coming before the assembly for its action. If decided by a 2/3 vote in the negative, the question is removed from before the assembly immediately. See Section 15. Whenever the word assembly, which is used throughout these rules, occurs in forms of motions, as in appeals, Section 14, it is better to replace it by the special term used to designate the particular assembly, as for instance, society, or convention, or board. The term Congress, when used in this manual, refers to the House of Representatives of the United States. Robert's Rules of Order, Part 1. Rules of Order. Article 1. Introduction of Business, Sections 1 through 5. 1. All business should be brought before the assembly by a motion of a member, or by the presentation of a communication to the assembly. It is not usual, however, to make a motion to receive the reports of committees, Section 30, or communications to the assembly, and in many other cases in the ordinary routine of business, the formality of a motion is dispensed with, but should any member object, a regular motion becomes necessary. 2. Before a member can make a motion or address the assembly upon any question, it is necessary that he obtain the floor. That is, he must rise and address the presiding officer by his title, thus, Mr. Chairman, Section 34, who will then announce the member's name. Where 2 or more rise at the same time, the chairman must decide who is entitled to the floor, which he does by announcing that member's name. From this decision, however, an appeal, Section 14, can be taken, though if there is any doubt as to who is entitled to the floor, the chairman can at the first allow the assembly to decide the question by a vote, the one getting the largest vote being entitled to the floor. The member upon whose motion the subject under discussion was brought before the assembly, or, in case of a committee's report, the one who presented the report, is entitled to be recognized as having the floor, if he has not already had it during that discussion, notwithstanding another member may have first risen and addressed the chair. If the chairman rise to speak before the floor has been assigned to anyone, it is the duty of a member who may have previously risen to take his seat. See Decorum in Debate, Section 36. When a member has obtained the floor, he cannot be cut off from addressing the assembly, nor be interrupted in this speech by a motion to adjourn or for any other purpose, by either the chairman or any member, except A, to have entered on the minutes a motion to reconsider, Section 27, B, by a call to order, Section 14, C, by an objection to the consideration of the question, Section 15, or D, by a call for the orders of the day, Section 13. See also Note to Section 61. In such cases, the member, when he arises and addresses the chair, should state at once for what purpose he rises, as, for instance, that he rises to a point of order. A call for an adjournment or for the question by members in their seats is not a motion, as no motion can be made without rising and addressing the chair, and being announced by the presiding officer. Such calls for the question are themselves breaches of order, and do not prevent the speaker from going on if he pleases. 3. Before any subject is open to debate, Section 34, it is necessary, first, that a motion be made, second, that it be seconded, see exceptions below, and third, that it be stated by the presiding officer. When the motion is in writing, it shall be handed to the chairman and read before it is debated. This does not prevent suggestions of alterations before the question is stated by the presiding officer. To the contrary, much time may be saved by such informal remarks, which, however, must never be allowed to run into debate. The member who offers the motion, until it has been stated by the presiding officer, can modify his motion or even withdraw it entirely. After it is stated, he can do neither without the consent of the assembly. See Sections 5 and 17. When the mover modifies his motion, the one who seconded it can withdraw his second. Exceptions: a call for the order of the day, a question of order, though not an appeal, or an objection to the consideration of a question, Sections 13, 14, 15, does not have to be seconded, and many questions of routine are not seconded or even made, the presiding officer merely announcing that if no objection is made, such will be considered the action of the assembly. 4. All principal motions, Section 6, amendments and instructions to committees should be in writing if required by the presiding officer. Although a question is complicated and capable of being made into several questions, no one member, without there is a special rule allowing it, can insist upon its being divided. His resource is to move that the question be divided, specifying in his motion how it is to be divided. Anyone else can move as an amendment to this to divide it differently. This division of a question is really an amendment, Section 23, and subject to the same rules. Instead of moving a division of the question, the same result can be usually attained by moving some other form of an amendment. When the question is divided, each separate question must be a proper one for the assembly to act upon, even if none of the others were adopted. Thus, a motion to commit with instructions is indivisible, because if divided, and the motion to commit should fail, then the other motion to instruct the committee would be improper, as there would be no committee to instruct. The 46th rule of the House of Representatives requires the division of a question on the demand of one member, provided it comprehends propositions in substance so distinct that one being taken away, a substantive proposition shall remain for the decision of the House. But this does not allow a division so as to have a vote on separate items or names. The 121st rule expressly provides that on the demand of 1/5 of the members a separate vote shall be taken on such items separately, and others collectively, as shall be specified in the call, in the case of a bill making appropriations for internal improvements. But this right to divide a question into items extends to no case but the one specified. The common parliamentary law allows of no division except when the assembly orders it, and in ordinary assemblies this rule will be found to give less trouble than the congressional one. The motion to strike out certain words and insert others is indivisible, as it is strictly one proposition. 5. After a question has been stated by the presiding officer, it is in the possession of the assembly for debate. The mover cannot withdraw or modify it if anyone objects, except by obtaining leave from the assembly, Section 17, or by moving an amendment. Article 2. General Classification of Motions, Section 6 through 9. 6. A principal or main question or motion is a motion made to bring before the assembly for its consideration any particular subject. No principal motion can be made when any other question is before the assembly. It takes precedence of nothing and yields to all privileged, incidental, and subsidiary questions. Section 7, 8, and 9. 7. Subsidiary or secondary questions or motions relate to a principal motion and enable the assembly to dispose of it in the most appropriate manner. These motions take precedence of the principal question and must be decided before the principal question can be acted upon. They yield to privileged and incidental questions, Sections 8 and 9, and are as follows, being arranged in their order of precedence among themselves. Lie on the table, see Section 19. The previous question, Section 20. Postpone to a certain day, Section 21. Commit, Section 22. Amend, Section 23. Postpone indefinitely, Section 24. Any of these motions except amend can be made when one of a lower order is pending, but none can supersede one of a higher order. They cannot be applied to one another except in the following cases. A. The previous question applies to the motion to postpone without affecting the principal motion, and can, if specified, be applied to a pending amendment. Section 20. B. The motions to postpone to a certain day and to commit can be amended. And C. A motion to amend the minutes can be laid on the table without carrying the minutes with it. Section 19. 8. Incidental questions are such as arise out of other questions, and consequently take precedence of and are to be decided before the questions which give rise to them. They yield to privileged questions, Section 9, and cannot be amended. Excepting an appeal, they are undebatable. An appeal is debatable or not according to circumstances, as shown in Section 14. They are as follows. Appeal, or questions of order, see Section 14. Objection to the consideration of a question, Section 15. The reading of papers, Section 16. Leave to withdraw a motion, Section 17. Suspension of the rules, Section 18. 9. Privileged questions are such as, on account of their importance, take precedence over all other questions whatever, and on account of this very privilege, they are undebatable, Section 35, excepting when relating to the rights of the assembly or its members, as otherwise they could be made use of so as to seriously interrupt business. They are as follows, being arranged in their order of precedence among themselves. To fix the time to which the assembly shall adjourn, see Section 10. Adjourn, Section 11. Questions relating to the rights and privileges of the assembly or any of its members, Section 12. Call for the orders of the day, Section 13. Article 3. Motions and their order of precedence. For a list of all the ordinary motions arranged in their order of precedence, see Section 64. All the privileged and subsidiary ones in this article are so arranged. Sections 10 through 27. Privileged motions, Sections 10 through 13. 10. To fix the time to which the assembly shall adjourn. This motion takes precedence of all others, and is in order even after the assembly has voted to adjourn, provided the chairman has not announced the result of the vote. If made when another question is before the assembly, it is undebatable, Section 35. It can be amended by altering the time. If made when no other question is before the assembly, it stands as any other principal motion and is debatable. In ordinary societies, it is better to follow the common parliamentary law and permit this question to be introduced as a principal question when it can be debated and suppressed. Sections 58 and 59. Like other questions, in Congress it is never debatable, and has entirely superseded the unprivileged and inferior motion to adjourn to a particular time. The form of this motion is, when this assembly adjourns, it adjourns to meet at such a time. 11. To adjourn. This motion, when unqualified, takes precedence of all others, except to fix the time to which to adjourn, to which it yields. It is not debatable, and cannot be amended, or have any other subsidiary motion applied to it. Section 7. If qualified in any way, it loses its privileged character, and stands as any other principal motion. The motion to adjourn can be repeated if there has been any intervening business, though it be simply progress in debate. Section 26. When a committee is through with any business referred to it and prepared to report, instead of adjourning, a motion should be made to rise, which motion in committee has the same privileges as to adjourn in the assembly. Section 32. The effect upon unfinished business of an adjournment is as follows. After 6 days from the commencement of a second or subsequent session of any Congress, all bills, resolutions, and reports which originated in the House and at the close of the next preceding session remained undetermined, shall be resumed and acted on in the same manner as if an adjournment had not taken place. Rule 136, House of Representatives. Any ordinary society that meets as seldom as once each year is apt to be composed of as different membership at its successive meetings as any 2 successive Congresses, and only trouble would result from allowing unfinished business to hold over to the next yearly meeting. See Session, Section 42. A. When it does not close the session, the business interrupted by the adjournment is the first in order after the reading of the minutes at the next meeting, and is treated the same as if there had been no adjournment, an adjourned meeting being legally the continuation of the meeting of which it is an adjournment. B. When it closes a session in an assembly which has more than one regular session each year, then the unfinished business is taken up at the next succeeding session previous to new business, and treated the same as if there had been no adjournment. See Section 44 for its place in the order of business, provided that, in a body elected for a definite time, as a board of directors elected for 1 year, unfinished business falls to the ground with the expiration of the term for which the board or any portion of them was elected. C. When the adjournment closes a session in an assembly which does not meet more frequently than once a year, or when the assembly is an elective body, and this session ends the term of a portion of the members, the adjournment shall put an end to all business unfinished at the close of the session. The business can be introduced at the next session, the same as if it had never been before the assembly. 12. Questions of privilege. Questions relating to the rights and privileges of the assembly or any of its members take precedence of all other questions, except the 2 preceding to which they yield. The previous question, Section 20, can be applied to these as to all other debatable questions. Section 13. Orders of the Day. A call for the orders of the day takes precedence of every other motion, excepting to reconsider, Section 27, and the 3 preceding, to which latter 3 it yields, and is not debatable, nor can it be amended. It does not require to be seconded. When 1 or more subjects have been assigned to a particular day or hour, they become the orders of the day for that day or hour, and they cannot be considered before that time, except by a 2/3 vote, Section 39. And when the day or hour arrives, if called up, they take precedence of all but the 3 preceding questions, Sections 10, 11, and 12. Instead of considering them, the assembly may appoint another time for their consideration. If not taken up on the day specified, the order falls to the ground. When the orders of the day are taken up it is necessary to take up the separate questions in their exact order, the one first assigned to the day or hour, taking precedence of one afterwards assigned to the same day or hour. A motion to take up a particular part of the orders of the day or a certain question is not a privileged motion. Any of the subjects, when taken up, instead of being then considered, can be assigned to some other time. The form of this question, as put by the chair when the proper time arrives, or on the call of a member, is, "Shall the order of the day be taken up?" or "Will the assembly now proceed with the orders of the day?" The effect of an affirmative vote on a call for the orders of the day is to remove the question under consideration from before the assembly, the same as if it had been interrupted by an adjournment. Section 11. The effect of a negative vote is to dispense with the orders merely so far as they interfere with the consideration of the question, then before the assembly. And although the next section about incidental motions does indeed look riveting, I think we'll end this evening's reading of Robert's Rules of Order, a classic of organizational procedure. Honestly, that read more like a tone poem than an instruction manual. If you'd like to read this work for yourself, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or request more from one we've already started, you can drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.